We found our own footprints leading somewhere we hadn't been. The forest had the kind of stillness that felt deliberate. Not quiet, watchful. The trees stood impossibly tall, trunks thick and furrowed like petrified muscle. Their branches knitted together overhead until the sky was reduced to thin, colorless slits. Moss coated everything below shoulder height, softening sound, swallowing scent. Even our footsteps felt muted, as though the ground were absorbing us one careful step at a time. We'd been hiking since dawn, following a trail that existed more by memory than by markers. No signs, no blazes, just a route passed down in fragments. Keep the ridge on your left, follow the creek until it disappears, don't camp near the split cedar. The deeper we went, the older the forest felt. Not just ancient in years, but layered, like it had lived many versions of itself and never fully let them go. That was when we noticed the silence changing. Birdsong faded first, then insects. The wind moved through the canopy, but it no longer carried sound with it. The air felt padded, dense. Every breath seemed too loud, every swallow intrusive. We slowed without discussing it. That was when Aaron stopped. "Hey," he said quietly, "come look at this." At first, I thought he meant the ground, until I followed his gaze and felt my stomach tighten. Footprints. Boot prints, clear and deep in the damp soil, following a narrow path between two twisted oaks. Fresh, crisp edges. No debris settled in them yet. They were ours. Same tread pattern, same scuffs, same uneven depth where my right heel always landed harder. I crouched beside one and pressed my gloved fingers into the soil next to it. The ground was cold and wet, recently disturbed. "These aren't from earlier," Leah said. "We didn't come this way." The prints led off the trail, angling downhill into a section of forest that looked darker, tighter. The trees there grew closer together, roots bulging above the earth like veins. I checked the compass. The needle spun, then settled, pointing confidently. "Wrong. We should turn back," Leah said. Aaron hesitated, eyes still fixed on the trail of footprints. "Or, we find out how these got here." The forest creaked softly, like a joint bending somewhere deep within it. We followed. The prints didn't hurry. They walked with our pace. When we slowed, they shortened their stride. When we stopped, they ended abruptly, toes pressed into the soil as if the person who made them had paused to consider something. The air grew colder as we descended. Light thinned. Sound behaved strangely. Our whispers came back flattened, delayed, stripped of direction. Sometimes an echo answered before we spoke. That was when we noticed the smell. Not rot, not decay, something familiar. Wood smoke, old fabric, the faint metallic tang of sweat. The footprints led us to a small clearing where the trees curved inward, forming a natural bowl. At its center stood a dead stump, split cleanly down the middle. Around it, the ground was churned with overlapping prints. Dozens of them, all ours, layered over one another in tight circles, as if we'd paced there endlessly. Some prints were deeper, others barely impressions at all. Some ended mid-step. Leah backed away. No, we didn't." A sound interrupted her. Footsteps, not from ahead, from behind us. Slow, measured, matching Aaron's stride exactly. I turned. The forest behind us looked unchanged. Trees, shadow, moss, depth folding into depth. But the sound continued, each step landing precisely where one of us would have stepped a second later. Then it changed rhythm. Now it matched Leah, then me. The forest seemed to inhale. Branches shifted overhead, knitting tighter. Light dimmed. The silence pressed closer, thick enough to feel against my skin. A voice spoke from somewhere between the trees. It used my voice. "Don't panic." The words were wrong, not in tone but in timing. They came half a second before I realized I was about to think them. Aaron spun, shouting my name. Something moved. Not a shape, an absence. A region where the forest failed to resolve properly, where bark blurred and shadow deepened unnaturally. It slid between the trees without disturbing them, without sound. More footprints appeared in the soil as it moved. Our footprints, being made without weight. Leah screamed as something brushed past her. No pressure, just cold, deep, hollow cold, like standing too close to an open grave. Her scream echoed wrong, repeating itself with slight variations, like copies degrading with each loop. The stump in the clearing creaked. I realized then what the forest had been doing all along. It wasn't following us. It was rehearsing. The thing stepped fully into the clearing, not visible, but present. The ground responded to it, soil compressing under unseen weight. The overlapping prints deepened, refined. Aaron's pack slid off his shoulders and dropped to the ground as if pulled by an invisible hand. His body followed, dragged backward, feet skimming the earth without leaving marks. His scream cut off sharply. When the forest exhaled again, he was gone. The footprints stopped where he had been. Leah sobbed, clinging to my arm. "It's learning us," she whispered. "That's why the tracks." The presence shifted, spoke again, this time in Aaron's voice. "Come back." The stump cracked, splitting further, revealing dark rings inside. Rings that looked disturbingly like years counted not in seasons, but in visitors. I understood then. The forest didn't create the footprints. It remembered them. Every step ever taken here. Every hesitation. Every turn made in fear. The thing wasn't a predator. It was a recorder. And once it learned you well enough, it no longer needed you to remain whole. We ran. The forest let us go, not out of mercy, but completion. The silence loosened. Sound returned in fragments. The trail reappeared as if it had never left. Rescue found Leah and me at the edge of the woods 2 days later. They asked about Aaron. We couldn't explain. They searched anyway. They found footprints deep in the forest, ours, leading to a clearing neither of us remembered. And beside them, fresh impressions appeared each night. Walking, practicing, waiting for us to come back and finish the path we'd already shown it how to follow. The trees grew denser behind us, blocking the path we came from. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The forest had that effect. Ancient trunks rising so close together that depth collapsed, distance bending into something unreliable. Snow-dusted branches braided overhead, sealing the sky into a thin, gray seam. The air was cold enough to ache, each breath frosting my lungs, each exhale vanishing too quickly, as if the forest disliked evidence of us. We'd been walking for hours, or maybe less. Time felt stretched, thinned. Our watches had stopped agreeing with one another sometime after we crossed the creek. The one that flowed uphill if you didn't look at it too closely. "Let's head back," Mara said. Her voice sounded smaller than it should have, flattened by the padded silence. "We've gone far enough." We turned. That was when we saw it. The path behind us, our path, was gone. Where there should have been a narrow corridor of trampled snow and broken twigs, there was only a wall of trees. Not fallen trees, not drifted snow, living ones. Trunks pressed shoulder to shoulder, bark unbroken. Roots swelling up from the earth like knuckles. Branches interlocked at chest height, woven so tightly they formed a lattice of wood and shadow. Moss and frost coated the gaps, sealing them. It looked old, older than anything we'd passed on the way in. "That's not..." Eli stepped forward, pushing against a branch. It didn't budge. The wood felt warm beneath his glove. Not with heat, but with resistance, like muscle tensing. "We came through here," he said. "I remember that split birch." I did too, or at least I thought I did. The forest creaked softly, the sound traveling through the trunks instead of the air. Somewhere above us, snow slid from a branch with a whisper that sounded uncomfortably like breath. We stood there too long, staring, trying to force memory to assert itself. The forest used that moment. The silence deepened, compressing until it felt like pressure against my ears. Even our heartbeats seemed muffled, internal, disconnected. When Mara shifted her weight, the crunch of snow under her boot came back wrong. Delayed, hollow, echoing twice from different directions. "Don't panic," she said. We'll find another way around. But the forest had already begun to rearrange itself. Ahead of us, the trees thinned just slightly, enough to suggest passage. A gentle curve between trunks. A path that hadn't been there before. Felt intentional. We followed because there was nothing else to do. As we walked, the woods grew tighter. Branches dipped lower, forcing us to hunch. The air smelled older here. Wet bark, mineral cold, something faintly sweet and decayed. Shadows moved when they shouldn't, sliding along the snow without a source. I tried to think of the trailhead, the sign, the car. The image kept slipping. Eli stopped suddenly. How long have we been out here? Mara checked her watch, frowned, tapped the screen. It says, yesterday. My phone showed no signal, no time, just a black mirror reflecting trees that looked too close behind me. We started arguing then, quietly at first, then sharper. About direction, about who suggested the detour, about whether the forest had always been this dense. The strangest part was how reasonable it all felt, as if the forest were gently guiding our thoughts, sanding down panic into something manageable, circular. We found markings on the trees, scratches at shoulder height, old and deep. Not claw marks, hand-shaped gouges, fingers splayed, dragged downward. Some overlapped, layered over years, decades, or longer. Mara touched one and flinched. It's smooth. The grooves had healed, bark grown over them in a way that suggested repetition. Damage accepted, incorporated. The path narrowed further, funneling us single file. When Eli walked ahead, the branches parted just enough to let him through, then eased back into place behind him, sealing the gap. I watched it happen, slowly, naturally, like a throat closing. That was when I realized something else. The forest wasn't just closing in. It was separating us. Sound began to behave differently depending on where we stood. When Eli spoke, his voice reached me thin and distorted, as if filtered through water. When Mara whispered, it sounded close enough to brush my ear, even when she was several steps away. At one point, I turned to answer Eli, and Mara wasn't there. I spun, heart slamming. Mara! She answered from my left, then from my right. Then she stepped into view ahead of me, looking just as startled as I felt. I didn't move, she said. None of us believed her. Not fully. The forest groaned. A low sound felt through the soles of my boots. Roots shifted beneath the snow, rearranging the ground in subtle ways. Slopes steepened where they hadn't been. Hollows appeared, dark and deep, pulling at our balance. We began to lose pieces of ourselves. Eli forgot his sister's name. Mara couldn't remember what city she lived in. When I tried to recall my own address, my thoughts slid off it like water on ice. The forest didn't take memories all at once. Thinned them, filtered them, left behind only what was necessary to keep moving. We reached a clearing that shouldn't have existed, an open circle where the snow lay undisturbed, no tracks, no animal sign. The trees around it bent inward slightly, like spectators leaning toward a stage. In the center stood a massive trunk, ancient beyond reason, bark layered thick and smooth, rings visible where the wood split and folded back into itself. It looked less grown than assembled. The air here felt different, warmer, heavy. I knew, without understanding how, that this was the heart of it. Why won't it let us go back? Mara asked, voice trembling. The answer came not in words, but in sensation. Pressure behind my eyes, a subtle alignment of thoughts. The forest didn't block the way back to keep us in. It blocked it to keep something else from leaving. The trees behind us thickened further, sealing completely. Ahead, the path widened just enough to invite us closer to the central trunk. I saw then that its bark bore impressions. Faces, half-formed, smoothed by time. Mouths open in soundless calls. Eyes closed, peaceful, preserved, kept. Eli took a step forward, then another. His expression softened, tension draining from his posture. I remember this, he said quietly. I think I've been here before. Mara grabbed his arm. He pulled away easily, as if she weighed nothing. The forest leaned in. Branches creaked. Roots tightened. Shadows converged at the base of the great tree. I understood then what the forest was. Not a trap, a vault, a living archive that fed on presence, on identity, on the continuity of being someone. It closed paths not to confuse but to preserve, isolating those who entered from time, from change, from the erosion of the outside world. The forest did not want us lost. It wanted us kept. Eli disappeared against the trunk, his form blurring, features smoothing into bark as if they'd always belonged there. The tree's rings shifted, accommodating him. Mara screamed. The sound was swallowed instantly. The trees behind us surged forward another inch. I ran. The forest let me go, not because it failed, but because it had already learned enough. Memory is easier to harvest when it ripens slowly. They found me days later on the road, barefoot, frostbitten, unable to say where I'd been. When they asked about the others, my mouth opened, and nothing came out. Sometimes, when I walk near old woods, I feel it again. That gentle pressure, that invitation. And behind me, always, the sound of trees growing closer, patiently blocking the way back to who I used to be, keeping what I almost became safely inside.